I'm very happy tonight to introduce to you Beth Fennelly, the author of a chapbook and 2 books of poetry. Her first book, Open House, won the 2001 Kenyon Review Prize and was a Book Sense Top 10 poetry pick. Her second, Tender Hooks, was recently published by Norton. She has received a Pushcart Prize and fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts and the Bread Loaf Writers Conference, and she was Diane Middlebrook Fellow at the University of Wisconsin. Fennelly is an assistant professor of English at the University of Mississippi and lives with her husband, the writer Tom Franklin, and their daughter Claire in Oxford, Mississippi. From Krakow's cobblestones bobbing like apples to trick the drunks, in its cathedral of chandeliers built from bones of monks, to Mississippi's cricket racket, its wine bowl of magnolia blooms, from teenage dancing in a Chicago club's strobe-lit cage, to the rarely discussed pleasures and bodily disintegrations of new motherhood. What unites these poems' wide-ranging subjects is Beth Fennelly's exuberant voice, an exuberance both for life and for language, despite the failings of each. We are lost, she writes in one poem, which means we notice everything. And these poems do notice everything, from the names of lipsticks to media's quirky neologisms, an athlete's stick-to-itiveness, a Kinko's ad, a whole new way to office. The inclusiveness of these poems extends to disturbing and revealing events in our human history, such as the siege of Paris, when the starving turned their hunger on zoo animals, killing them 2 by 2, relishing roasted camel on a spit, as much as it extends to experience likely much more familiar to us, such as a writer as a college student living on ramen noodles. What Fennelly reminds us in her work is that the failings we bring to language are ultimately gifts. These fractures are openings, offering us entirely new views of ourselves and of the world. Misunderstandings become missed understandings, as in one poem, miscarriage becomes missed carriage, birthing a girl's image of a baby brother held through the carriage window by sequined gloves, in a truer understanding of loss than the technical term could ever carry. The names of things will never lose their hold on this girl, or on the writer who thrills in all of language's near misses. Tender hooks, a mishearing of tenterhooks, becomes a metaphor for motherhood, for love in all its fierce tenderness. I wrote tender hooks, Fennelly has said, not to provide answers, but to understand the questions. At times elegiac, at times ecstatic. As she questions both joy and loss, Beth Fennelly always celebrates a timely, lucky life just beyond the margins of words, as well as within them. Please welcome now Beth Fennelly.
Thanks so much for that introduction. That was lovely. And I'm glad you all are here. Thanks for coming out. I've enjoyed yesterday and today on this campus. It's really beautiful, and the students I've met, so thanks a lot. I thought I would begin with a poem from my first book, Open House. I wrote this poem because, well, writing about family is kind of tricky. I write a lot about my husband, but they're all love poems, so that's easy enough. I write about my daughter, but she's 3 and can't read. That's okay. I always knew the hard thing would be writing about my mother, because she's really wonderful, but we have kind of a complex relationship, and I knew someday I would probably want to do that, and then that it would get me in a lot of trouble. What finally made me do it is I published a little chapbook, and one day my mom sent it to her sister, and then she called me into her office and said, "Oh, Beth Ann, you have to read this note from Aunt Mary Pat." So I'm reading it, it says, Dear Mariana, thank you so much for sending me Beth Ann's poems. I really enjoyed the poems, and the Post-it notes really helped. So my mom had gone through my book and added little corrections, mentioned things I've got wrong, or her own thoughts about what I should have said here or there. And I thought it was such a terrible thing to do that. I sat down and I wrote a poem, and it's in the form of Post-it notes. I don't know if you can see that at all. So these are kind of what I imagined she came up with. I don't know what she had said. Mother sends my poem to her sister with Post-its. This man is an abstract painter, gives his women one eye, 3 breasts, a very famous man. She doesn't smoke anymore. A kind of cheese? This woman is not me, she says, even though I used to ice skate with Bill in a red scarf in winter. That's how the French girls got the silk from the worms. They dipped the cocoons in scalding tubs of water, 13th century. This apple is a symbol. She got this wrong. It was me, not her father, who sang her Irish Rosie when she was so sick with the measles. When she writes, far gone train, it means she plans to come back home. So I used to send my mom every poem that I wrote that was published, and this is the one poem in the first book that she had never seen until the book came out, and I always knew when the book came out she'd see the poem and what would happen then. And so when the book came out, she called me up and she said, well, Beth Ann, now I know why you never showed me that poem. And I said, why, Mom? And she said, you wanted me to be honored by the tribute. You're right again, Mom, I said. This is a sonnet. Poem not to be read at your wedding. You asked me for a poem about love in place of a wedding present, trying to save me money. For 3 nights I've lain under glow-in-the-dark stars. I've stuck to the ceiling over my bed. I've listened to the songs of the galaxy. Well, Carmen, I would rather give you your 3rd set of steak knives than tell you what I know. Let me find you some other store-bought present. Don't make me warn you of stars, how they see us from that distance, as miniature and breakable, from the bride who tops the wedding cake to the Mary on Pinto dashboards, holding her ripe red heart in her hands. And I thought I would read this poem called The Insecurities of Great Men. I wrote it when I was in graduate school because I was reading a really cool book by Carl Sagan, and he was talking about the possibility of life in the universe, and talking about the different things they put in a space probe to send out into outer space with the idea that aliens would come across it and would know what life is like on Earth. And I just thought that was such a cool thing to think about. What images would you choose? They had these copper-plated photographs that were supposed to be indestructible, that would be images of life on Earth that people who didn't speak English, aliens, would be able to look at and decide that we were, friendly people, not bomb us or whatever. And there was this long list of things that they had put in the probe, and one of the things said, at the last moment, a stick figure drawing of a pregnant woman was substituted for a photograph. And I started thinking about that, first, what would a stick figure drawing of a pregnant woman look like, And also, why would that have to be substituted for? And I read this, when I was in my early 20s, but now that I'm actually pregnant, I thought maybe I should read it. It would have a whole different kind of meaning, perhaps. And it's about the radio wave transmission a little bit, because the reason, there's people who do nothing but listen to radio waves with the idea, Joy, I don't know, I just spotted you guys. I'm so happy to see you. How are you? Oh, good. Okay, I'm sorry. I just saw a former student who I didn't know I'd be seeing here tonight. So anyway, the poem looks like radio waves, because there are these people who do nothing but listen to radio waves, hoping to transmit or be the recipient of alien communication. the insecurities of great men. It is a job for great men to pack a probe with what we do and love, to say to the infinite, here we are. Imagine the great men grown from boys who used to dream of hitting a ball so hard it never came back. A Homer's wild ellipsis out in space. How did they decide what to include? Carl Sagan consulted his team of rocket scientists, even the blind physicist who's never seen a star, but listens to their radio waves to catch any SOS from the frizzy hiss of space. Naturally selected to represent us, here are the photos they chose for the probe. Eagles, sequoias, seashells, the sun, the Great Wall, the Taj Mahal, a group of astronauts, and a stick-figure pregnant woman. One wonders why this bare-bones sketch, what part of pregnancy offends, the flaking of colostrum from the darkened areolas, the white stitches on the stretching seams of skin, the linea nigra, that dark track linking navel to genitalia, reminding even great men of that black hole from which they sprang. Or is it because she's an everyday miracle the sum of their studies has failed to explain? Or again, the pure, non-Euclidean plane of her, the fuzzy math, the census taker's irritation at factoring she who is more than she is. Does the death rattle of some distant star give birth to more in them than a universe kick-starting beneath her swollen fingers? Or is the substitution a concession to the delicacy of the imagined aliens? Oh, great men, how will those creatures RSVP when they circle in the wet grass where the probe has landed, belly up, slick with perspiration, moaning open in their arms, yielding its precious issue with a gust of steam and rust into their holy and natural world, and a woman made of sticks unhinges in their hands. The last poem I'm going to read from this book is a love poem for my husband. It's at least a kind of love poem, and this poem actually gives a recipe for pesto, if any of you guys like to cook. Why I can't cook for your self-centered architect cousin. Because to me, a dinner table's like a bed. Without love, it's all appetite and stains. Let's buy takeout for your cousin, or order pizza, his toppings. But I can't lift my spatula to serve him what I am. Instead, invite our favorite misfits over. I'll feed shaggy Otis who, after filet mignon, raised his plate and sipped Merlot sauce with such pleasure, my ego pardoned his manners. Or I'll call Mimi, the chubby librarian who paused over tiramisu. I haven't felt so satisfied since, then cried into its curls of chocolate. Or Randolph might stop by, who once, celebrating his breakup with the vegetarian, so packed the pursine of his wiry body with shrimp, he unbuttoned his pants and spent the evening couched, waiting for the swelling to go down. Or maybe I'll just cook for us. I'll crush pine nuts, unhinged from the cone's prickly shingles. I'll whittle the Parmesan, and if I grate a knuckle, it's just more of me in my cooking. I'll disrobe garlic cloves of their rosy sheaths, thresh the basil till moist, then liberate the oil. Then I'll dance that green joy through the fettuccine, a tumbling, leggy dish will imitate after dessert. If my embrace detects the 5 pounds you win each year, you will merely seem a generous portion. And if you bring my hand to your lips and smell the garlic that lingers, that scents the sweat you lick from the hollows of my clavicles, you're tasting the reason that I can't cook for your cousin, my saucy, my strongly seasoned love. now I really miss him. And I won't see him for 4 days. I wanted to read some poems from my new book, Tender Hooks. It came out in April. I wrote this book because when I was pregnant with my daughter, I started thinking that I didn't really know that much about babies and hadn't really spent a lot of time around them, and I wanted to do a really good job as a mother. I wanted to get an A+. So I started reading every book I could find, every guidebook by any doctor, anything on child development, pregnancy, anything. And I thought that I was really, really well prepared to be a mother. And then Claire came and I was completely unprepared because it's so much weirder and wilder and harder and better than is written about in any book by any pediatrician. So I was filled with all these questions, and I started writing poems to figure out what I was going through and to understand things a little better. And I didn't really realize I was writing a whole book about my daughter's first year. I'm sure if I had figured that out in time to stop myself, I would have, but instead, here they are. This is the one that opens the book. Bite me. You who are all cliches of baby soft, crawl to my rocking chair, pull up on my knees. Lift your delicate finger to the silver balloon from your first birthday. Open your warm red mouth and let float your word, your fourth in this world. Balloon. Then, delighted, bite my thigh. I practice my stern no. You smile, then bite my shin. No, I say again, which feels like telling the wind no when it blows. But how to stop you? This month you've left your mark on me through sweatshirts and through jeans. 6 teeth brooches that take a week to fade from my collarbone, my hip, my wrist. What fierceness in that tiny snapping jaw, your after grin. You don't bite your teething rings, don't bite your toys, your crib, other children, or your father. It makes us wonder. Daughter, when you were nearly here, when you were crowning, and your father could see your black hair, and lifted in his trembling hands the scissors to cut your tie to me. When a nurse had gone to the waiting room to assure my mother just a few more pushes, then had the heat lamp warming the bassinet beside my cot, when another held up the hand mirror so I could see you sliding out, you started turning, wriggling your elbows up, the mandala of your black hair turning and turning like a pinwheel, like laundry in the eye of the washer, like the eye of the storm that was just beginning and would finish us off forever, because you did it. You got stuck, quite stuck. And so they said I'd have to push head, shoulders, elbows out at once. And Lord, did I push. For 3 more hours, I pushed. I pushed so hard I shat. Pushed so hard blood vessels burst in my face and in my chest. Pushed so hard my asshole turned inside out like a rosebud. Pushed so hard that for weeks to come the whites of my eyes were red with blood, my face a boxer's, swollen and bruised, though I wasn't thinking then about the weeks to come, or anything at all except pushing and dying, and your father was terror and blood splatter, like he too was being born, and he was, we were, and finally I burst at the seams and you were out. Look, ha, you didn't kill me after all. Monster, I have you and you are mine now, mine. And it is no great wonder that you bite me. Because you were crowning and had to eat your way out of me. Because you were crowning and developed a taste for my royal blood. So I hope that wasn't too much information for anybody. My husband thinks that the government should pay me to go around to high schools where teens are at risk of getting pregnant. That'd be great. Prophylactic poetry. Doesn't it have a teacher? Thanks for the water, Alex.
No problem.
Okay. This is a prose poem. Favors. People look at my baby and wonder whom she favors. Because she doesn't look like me, they decide she looks like her father. I nod. I nod and nod. But really she favors the great dead one. My own bad dad. She favors him, the same brown eyes, the same scooped out philtrum, that valley leading from nose to mouth, as if the warm fingers which formed her stroked a perfect pinky tip there to sculpt it. A valley filled with orchards, where dusk brings cinnamon velvet deer who crunch sweet apples fallen beneath the bee-buzzing, white-blooming trees. See? I love her. So even from the grave, he spites me. Look at him, winning again, crying in the bassinet. Here I come on quick feet, unbuttoning my blouse. So, if you learn nothing else tonight, now you know what a philtrum is. This is your philtrum. Aren't you glad? Didn't you always want to know what that was called? It's your philtrum. So there's so many weird things about having a baby, and one of them is that, when Claire was itty bitty, she always liked me better, and then all of a sudden she went into a daddy phase, which I guess is pretty common. Kids do that. They sometimes favor one parent, and they want to be with that one parent. And I know the idea is it's just like a cognitive stage, and you're supposed to be mature and accept it and say, oh, she's in her daddy phase. But I'm not very mature, and it really hurt my feelings, even though she was this tiny little baby. But she wouldn't let me, she didn't want me to even hold her for a couple months. It was terrible. So I wrote a bitchy little poem and felt better immediately. Daddy phase, we say, as the child slaps the bottle from my hand, but opens wide for daddy. Daddy phase, perfectly natural, just a stage, as she calls for him upon waking. Daddy phase, as he rises to her, tired but flattered, pretending I'm the lucky one, inviting me to keep sleeping, as if I care to keep sleeping on the stale white bread of this marriage bed daddy phase. Me, I'm a huge, bland lawn jockey. And she is a perfect size 0. Gigging the tireless horse of her father back and forth across the kitchen tile. I think she just pretends to be a baby. I would like to pitch a fit when she ducks my kiss, my lips 2 fat hot dogs cooling at the drive-thru. But would she bother to notice? Would she feel compelled to empathize? No, because she's a baby. It's a brilliant plan. A determined competitor, I diversify my offerings. Have you seen this one? I ask her. Apparently she has. If only she still drank my milk, still drank my blood-warm milk, then I could squeeze her, squeeze her, squeeze her. Oh, there were entire years before she existed. Years of the single fare, years of the road trip, years of the fishnets and the fake ID, the Doc Martens, the come as you are, the backpack, hip flask, do not disturb. I used to be a restaurant hostess. Oh, I had the power then. tapping a pencil on my bottom lip or slipping it whisperingly down the waiting list, the tips that I palmed, the gents that I stacked like quarters on a pool table, one crook of my long red nail, how they would leap to my side, but now we're in the daddy phase. So now I remember that each spring I'd discover in the restaurant coat check room some sad brown parka, forgotten, forsaken. So now I feel the elbows of the empty wire hangers. So now I hear them titter and hiss. But we're doing much better now. In case anyone feels like you need to call child welfare services or something. We worked that all out. She likes me better again. So. Happy news. I thought I'd read this poem because it actually came up tonight when I was having dinner with the students from the literary magazine. I wrote this poem because I was thinking about the tyranny of people who live in fashionable places. And the reason why that was on my mind was because when my first book was coming out, I was so excited for it to come out, and I've always loved the book, and I always envisioned what the cover would look like. And my editor told me, well, this designer in Paris is going to do your cover as a favor to me. And I was so excited. She was in fashion in Paris. I just knew it was going to be completely fabulous. And one day the mock-up arrived, via email attachment, and I opened it up, and it was so ugly. It was heartbreaking. And I was kind of in a fix because I wanted to be like the happy author, the one who was easy to work with. I didn't want to be a problem about anything. But I really, really hated the cover, and I decided that I would like it. I would learn to like it. So I printed out a color copy and I wrapped it around a book, and I kept pretending that I'd pick it up, which I would not do. And then I put it in my bookshelf and I pretended to come across it, like randomly, oh, what's this, after like looking at other covers, And it got worse, after looking at it compared to other covers. It was so, so awful. And my editor called me and said, I haven't heard from you about the cover. And I said, well, maybe I don't understand the artist's vision. And he said, well, I'll have her call you, and she can explain it. So the phone rings from Paris, and she's immediately, aggressive, and she says, I hear you don't like my design. And then she said, what area code is 662? And I said, Mississippi. And she said, oh, well, my designs aren't for everyone. They're subtle. And so we got on the phone, and I felt so awful. I had bad taste. I never knew, And I just felt so rotten, that obviously I didn't understand how great this cover was. But then a couple days went by, and I just realized that she was wrong. And so I wrote a poem about it, and then I designed my own cover. I need to be more French or Japanese. Then I wouldn't prefer the California wine. It's big sugar, big fruit rolling across my tongue, a cornucopia spilled across a tacky tablecloth. I'd prefer the French. It's smoke and rot. C'est saison, le monde, c'est terrible, which means the world, it bites the big weenie. People sound smarter in French. The Japanese prefer the crescent moon to the full, prefer the rose before it blooms. Oh, I have been to the temples of Kyoto. I have stood on the Pont Neuf, and my eyes, they drank it in. But my taste buds shuffled along in the beer line at Wrigley Field. It was the day they gave out foam fingers. I hereby pledge to wear more gray, less yellow of the beaks of baby mockingbirds, that huge yellow yawping open on wobbly necks, trusting something yummy will be dropped inside soon. I hereby pledge to be reserved. When the French designer learned I didn't like her mock-ups for my book cover, she sniffed, they're not for everyone, they're subtle. What area code is 662 anyway? I said, Mississippi, sweetheart, bet you couldn't find it with a map. Okay, I didn't really. But so what if I'm as subtle as May in Mississippi? My nose in the wine bowl of this magnolia bloom. So what if I'm as mellow as the punch-drunk bee? If I were Japanese, I'd write a tone poem about magnolias in March, each bud long as a pencil, sheathed in celadon suede, jutting from a cluster of glossy leaves. I'd end the poem before anything bloomed. End with the rains bursting the buds and the sheaths falling to the grass like a fairy's cast-off slippers, like candy wrappers, like spent firecrackers. Yes, my poem would end there, spent firecrackers. If I were French, I'd capture post-peak in July, the petals floppy, creased brown with age, the stamens naked, stripped of yellow filaments. The bees, lazy now, bungling the ballet, thinking for the first time about October. If I were French, I'd prefer this, end with the red-tipped filaments scattered on the scorched brown grass. And my poems would incite the sophisticated, the French and Japanese readers, because the filaments look like matchsticks, and it's matchsticks we all know that start the fire. We are also talking about haiku tonight at dinner, and I've written a lot of little tiny poems, I guess because sometimes as a new mom that's all you have time for. I thought I'd share one with you. First day at daycare. My daughter comes home smelling like another woman's perfume. Say cheese. I've documented everything. Each tooth, your first haircut, your first bath in the sink. Later, when you claim neglect, I've proof of my side for your husband or your shrink. Because there's so many more pictures of my older sister than me, you know? And I know it's because my mom was busy, but it makes me think, like, did I not have a second birthday party? You know, because there's no pictures of it, you know? It kind of makes you insane, I think, you know? And then, you know, do you remember how little kids wear the pajamas that are all one piece? They have the little feet on them and they zip up. That's like my favorite article of clothing ever. I just think that, you know, like it makes your baby like a little present. Like you get to unwrap them, you know, they're so cute. And one day, you know, Claire grew out of her footy pajamas and, you know, so I went to the store to try and buy some more and they didn't make them in her size. And I know now it's because when kids are being potty trained, it's like too hard to do the whole unzipping thing. You have to have like, you move over to the two-piece. But I felt this incredible sense of betrayal that she had left the footy pajamas and I didn't even like know her last night in footy pajamas. You know, like I wasn't able to like mark it somehow. And you know, they grow so fast that it kind of makes you crazy. And I was thinking about how I'm crazy. So, elegy for the footy pajamas. No snap between your legs for months. But how? When did I last gnaw sausages cased in terry cloth? When did I last unsnap, snap, snap? I've gone to the door and I've shouted, I am missing something. Hey you, in your big girl PJs, don't you have a little sister? What is mommy doing? I'm reading in a disco. No, it's not a disco. It's my office with your finger on the light switch. 2 years lived under a strobe light. When I look up, you're there, then there and there. When I look up, you've nailed the cha-cha, the foxtrot. What happened in the in-between? What is mommy reading? A book with pages torn out by Kenny Mullins in grade 4. Kenny Mullins, why do you do that, I said. He said, because you're fat. 20 years later in Starbucks, Kenny Mullins says, sorry about the book, it was a joke. He says, don't put me in a poem. He says, ha ha ha. Now he's fat and also bald. Oh yes, now I say ha ha ha. I don't like myself like this. I'm leaving something out. Like me. Do you? Tomorrow you'll ask for the keys. Answers no. Buttering me up in advance, you say, Mommy, I be the snake, you be the dark. Fast child of a fast mother. It's been years, but I haven't forgotten being the dark. It comes right back. It's like pushing someone off a training bike. So, I'm going to read 2 more. I wanted to read this one because I was thinking about how many people here tonight are writers, poets, and engaged in this difficult endeavor of, putting words on the page, and that this is the closest I've ever come to giving advice to a writer. And this is actually an excerpt from a longer poem. The poem is called Telling the Gospel Truth, and I'm just going to read actually part of a section because it's a very long poem. The next time a student asks how to become a writer, I will say, sit in a white room without paper and think of the hunter who shot the wing off the bald eagle, who must have seen he wrecked his trophy and, disgusted, did not offer it a second bullet, but thrashed off deeper into the forest, wearing his expensive forest-colored clothes. Then, think of the man from the wild bird sanctuary who found the eagle, sutured its ragged wing stub, fed the awkward hopping thing for years, and, before it died, harnessed it in a hang glider and took it to the mountain, so one last time its hollow bones could float, so one last time its eyes could scour the forest floor from hunter's height, so one last time its talons could tear the gauzy cloak of sky, flying in the face of God, that one last time. Think of the poacher. Think of the birder. Alternate, shortening the intervals. Don't forget to breathe. When you can hold both of these men in the palm of your mind at the same time, love, come find me and teach me. So I'm going to end with another love poem from my husband, which I probably shouldn't do because I'll really be missing him and Claire now. But I wrote this poem because I spent a year living in Madison, Wisconsin, and when I was there was this gorgeous poet couple, and they were always writing these really sexy love poems to each other and giving them, reading them publicly. And, I kind of looked up to them, and he had a tenure-track job, and she got a fellowship to go to Paris for the year. And he gave up his job to go with her to Paris. So I thought, God, in addition to being these beautiful people, they even have the whole gender thing worked out. I always kind of thought, like, God, what's going to happen to them? They're so fabulous. And I found out what happened to them. They went to Paris and she dumped him. Yeah, and a couple months after that, a journal arrived in the mail that had one of his love poems to her that he had written before. And I thought, what a bittersweet moment that must have been, because there's such a long lag time between when you write something and when you can get it published, and your emotions can completely change, and he must have been so sad to get that poem in the mail. So I was starting thinking, like, how crazy poets are to write about what they're feeling when that changes all the time. And right about then, I was reading the Norton's Anthology of Modern Poetry. You guys probably have that big white tombstone, you know what I'm talking about? And I came to the section on Robert Lowell, and it's 10 pages long. And in those 10 pages, he has poems to 3 wives and 2 girlfriends. So I wrote this. And this will be my last poem, and then I'll just say thank you very much. Why we shouldn't write love poems, or if we must, why we shouldn't publish them. How silly Robert Lowell seems in Norton's. All his love vows on facing pages. His second wife who simmered like a wasp. His third, the dolphin who saved him. Even skunk hour for Miss Bishop. He proposed though she was gay, and so on. A 10-page manic zoo of love. He should have praised less and bought a dog. We fall in love. We fumble for a pen. We send our poems out like Jehovah's Witnesses. In time, they return home, and when they do, they find the locks changed, for sale, stabbed in the yard. Oh, aren't the poems stupid and devout, trying each key in their pockets in plain view of the neighbors, some of whom openly gloat. We should write about what we know won't change. Volleyball, mildew, styrofoam. If I want to write about our picnic in Alabama, I should discuss the red clay earth or fire ants, not what happened while we sat cross-legged there, leaning over your surprise for me. Crawfish you boiled with, surprise again, 3 times too much crab boil. Oh, how we thumbed apart the perforated joints and scooped the white flesh from the red parings, blowing on our wet hands between bites because they burned like stars. Afterward, in the public park, in hot sun, on red clay, inside my funnel of thighs and skirt, your spicy, burning fingers found my sweet meat and strummed it until it too was burning, burning, burning. Ah, poem, I am weak from love, and you are sneaky. Do not return home to shame me. Thank you very much. Thanks.
We have books for sale, and Beth Ann would be happy to sign them, but before that, maybe she would be willing to take a few questions if anybody has anything they'd like to ask.
Don't feel bad if you don't have questions, that's okay.
One thing that I've been kind of given some thought to lately is kind of the process of organizing a book.
Mm-hmm.
How do you go about that?
Well, I think that's really, really hard. And in fact,
Yeah.
When I was in graduate school, I was trying to think through how to organize a book, and I thought, well, I'll just figure out what other poets have done, so I came up with this great idea. I was going to interview 5 poets who had books I thought were cool, and I'd write an article on it, and I'd get paid, and then I'd know how to do my book. So I interviewed the 5 poets, and it came out in Poets and Writers. It's called something, How 5 Poets Structured a Book. And basically they all said it's like completely individual, and I got no help whatsoever. You know what I mean? So it was like a wash completely. But ultimately I think what people do is put all their poems down on the floor and get a sense of them, try and read them one after the other. But I think it's really immensely challenging. My first book was written over a longer period of time. It has a lot of different material in it. It has some very formal poems, and it has some experimental poems, and I had a really hard time organizing the book until I came up with the concept of the book as a house, and each section being rooms, and someone reading the book, like walking through the rooms. And that after that, then I hit the organization for that. The second book was easier because it was chronological with my daughter. So you could have a kid, see, and then it's tricky though. I think also I didn't know how to do it because I don't read books like from first page to the end. I've never read books that way. I always just pick up a book and flip through and get a title I like, and so I had never really thought about the process of reading a first poem in a book. to all the way through the end and how they build or comment on earlier poems. So I started doing that too. And actually, I always do that now. Now that I know how much thought goes into it, I do it. Sir?
Have you written any poems that you keep privately to yourself, or are you really, do you write to show them? Do you write to?
Yeah, I keep the bad ones to myself, if I think your kind of question is like, have I ever kept anything to myself because it's too personal to share? Yeah. Well, no. Do you think I should? Yeah. I guess I just feel like if I've worked on it long enough that I ultimately think it's kind of, there's something about it that's redeeming beyond like, here I am, then it's worth kind of showing. But, I was kind of talking earlier about writing about my mom, and I would have to say, like, I have purposely not done it, because she couldn't handle it. You know what I mean? And, like, why make her sad? She's a really nice person. She just drives me crazy, So I just don't need to be writing that, If I really, really needed to, I think I would. But if I can stop myself, and I have been able to so far. Except for the Post-it poem, which she thinks is a tribute.
Okay, well, we will have books up front, and I'm sure Beth Ann would be happy to talk to you
Sure,
more
thanks a lot.
individually.
I appreciate y'all coming out tonight. Thank you.